Glad you're here. Okay, good to see everybody. Thank you for being here. So I didn't get to say everything that I had hoped to explain to you in our class on Sunday. I got through most of it, but not quite everything, and that's all right. We're going to start off with a final point about the program and how we're proceeding with this. But this final point, it's going to take me about half the class to go through, okay? So finally, but not immediately, right? Now, I really need those of you who are the teachers of the children next quarter to especially be paying attention to this first section, okay? Because we're going to be talking about some of the memorization work that we would like to incorporate into the kids' Bible classes. Now, I want all of us to try this too, okay? Even us big kids can be doing this as well, but we especially want the younger classes to be going through this. Now, as we are... Now, see, Alan, you got the clicker for me, but you didn't turn it on. I'm telling you, man. So, thank you. The authors of our books, the Waldrons, Bob and Sandra Waldron, they have also published another companion book. It's called The Three-Cycle Approach, A Method for Organizing Bible Knowledge. Now, this is not a book that we purchased for everybody, but we did purchase, I don't know, what was it, Kyle, 10, 12 copies of this little book. You could buy one of these if you wanted to. They're real cheap, but we've got a dozen or so of these in the library or the high school classroom on the shelves in there. You remember on Sunday, I talked about how our second aim in this material was to create some kind of organized system so that we could retrieve information, right? We have all these loosely gathered Bible facts, but we don't really have a great way of organizing those facts, okay? Well, that's what this little book aims to help us do, to organize all of this scriptural content. So we will occasionally refer to this approach as we go throughout our classes. And I'm emphasizing the word occasionally in our adult classes because really we have a lot of other things that we have to get to. We can't spend half a class period every week trying to work on memory work, okay? But in the youth classes, they're going to be going through this a lot. And so again, as I said on Sunday, parents, it's good for us to be going through this as well so we can help our children. Three-cycle approach to organizing the scriptures. So what does that mean? Well, the first cycle, you may recognize this, especially if you have kids that come to Bible drill. I've been going over the 17 time periods with our young kids in Bible drill for 5.5 years now. If you don't know these 17 time periods of the Bible, just ask your children. They will help you, okay? If you take the entire Bible, Genesis to Revelation, you can divide it up into these 17 time periods. Now, you could divide the Bible up into 46 time periods. But 46 time periods would be a lot more difficult to memorize than just 17. So I really like what Brother Waldron has done here. Dividing the scriptures up into these 17 time periods, and this is the first cycle. So cycle 1, memorize these 17 time periods. We're going to go over it tonight. Okay? We're going to work on these tonight. But this is the first cycle. You do not move on to cycle 2 until you have mastered cycle 1. And by mastered, I mean you can say it top to bottom, bottom to top. I could take some of these off and you would be able to figure out which ones are missing. Okay? You master cycle 1. Then you go over to cycle 2. Now here's what cycle 2 does. It takes each of the 17 time periods and it breaks it down into smaller content subjects. So let's just look at this first time period. Before the flood. What are some of the things that would fit in before the flood? Creation. Adam and Eve. Okay, good. So cycle number 2 is going to take time period number 1 before the flood, and then it's going to break it down into smaller segments. Now we start to memorize those. And once we have cycle 2 mastered, then we move on to cycle 3. Now it's actually pretty easy. Cycle 2 is by far the hardest one. Going from cycle 2 to cycle 3 is quite easy, but the new content is in orange. Cycle 2 takes each of the 17 periods and breaks it down into smaller sections. This is kind of tough. There's a lot to memorize with this. But then this leads us into cycle 3, and all you're doing in cycle 3 is taking each of those time periods from cycle 2, and you're adding scriptural parameters to them. So that would look like this. We go before the flood. Here's all of those 5, creation, Adam and Eve, first sin, Canaan. Here's those 5 categories from cycle 2. And now, new information in orange. Now we're just adding the scriptural parameters to it. Where do we find this in the Bible? Where's Cain and Abel in the Bible? Genesis 4. Where's the generations of Adam in the Bible? Genesis 5. Okay? So now you're just taking those same things that you've memorized from cycle 2 and you're adding the scriptural locations to them. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, how many of you look at this and you think, man, that looks like a lot of work? Bunch of liars. Yeah. Thank you to like the 4 of you who said, yeah, that looks like a lot of work. Okay. This is just the first time period. Okay? So there's 16 more of these to do. This is a lot. Okay? But it's not so bad if you start when you're this tall. Okay? If we start this with our young ones, they can pick up on this. They will get this. You and I, as old folks, can pick up on this too. It might just take us a little more time. Now, if you picked up the handout that I distributed on Sunday or made available on Sunday about the Genesis memory work, did everybody get one of those? Okay, there's still some out there on the table. If you read through that handout, you saw something on there, a reference to something called the Leitner method of memorization. How many of you researched that? Anybody? Okay. It's basically a memorization device that uses flashcards and spaced out flashcards, okay? So for those of you who really want to drill down onto this memory work, I'm going to recommend the Leitner method of memorization. We use it at our home, and it works really great. And if you want to do this after class tonight, hang around, and right here at the table, I'm going to show you how to do it. It'll take 5 minutes. Okay? So if you want to try that, hang around immediately after class, and I'll show you how to do it. Okay. So this is the 3-cycle approach. If you hear me make a reference to 3-cycle approach, this is what I'm talking about. Okay? All right. Now, on the Genesis memory work handout that I gave you on Sunday, of the 10 pieces of information that you were given to memorize, 3 of them were cycle number 1. I took the 17 periods, I split it up into 3 pieces so that you can work on memorizing each piece one at a time, and if you do that, you'll get all 17 of them. Okay? So we got any questions about how the cycle 3 or cycles 1, 2, and 3 work? Any questions about that? Okay. Again, really hitting this in the kids' classes, but we're going to do some of this too. All right? Because it's good for us to challenge ourselves as well. All right. So, it's like the old TV antenna. Yeah? Okay? No? There's too many young people in here. Nobody got that. All right. We're going to walk through the 17 time periods. I know I just had them all up on the screen, but we're going to walk through them and see the logic of them. Okay? So, the first one is before the flood. Now, when I was learning these as a kid, I tried to condense this down into 3 time periods. Before the flood, the second one is the flood, and then the third one that I wanted was everything after the flood. But my teachers never went for that. They insisted that I learn the rest of them, okay? So, we start with before the flood. That's going to be the stories like creation, Adam and Eve in the garden, the first sin, Cain and Abel, generations of Adam in Genesis chapter 5. Then we get to the second time period, which is the flood itself. That's going to be Genesis 6 through 9. Then we go to the third time period, which takes us to the scattering of the people, and that's just a reference to the Tower of Babel, right? When people were scattered from across the earth. Oh, you asked me to do the hand motions. Okay, I'm sorry. Mary Gail wanted to go down to the kids' level to learn the hand motions. All right, so when I do the hand motions with the kids in Bible drill, we do it like this. We say, before the flood, okay? This is the earth that God made. This is not a pregnant woman, as one of the kids asked me once. All right, before the flood. This is the earth before the flood. Then, raindrops, the flood, okay? Now, the next one's a little bit confusing, but it makes sense. Scattering of the people. You just hold your arms up like this. Go ahead, don't be shy. I know we're all adults, but it's okay. Remember, you're doing this with your kids, or maybe your grandkids one day, okay? All right? Scattering of the people. Now, there's 2 things to think about with this. So we're making a tower with our hands, okay? That's the idea here. But there's a secondary reason that this hand motion makes sense. What chapter in Genesis does the story of the Tower of Babel occur in? 11. Okay, it helps you remember. Genesis 11. Okay, all right, good. Now, after the people scatter, then we come to Genesis chapter 12, and we're introduced to the first of 4 patriarchs. Okay, now this one also works in 2 ways. It's the 4th time period, the patriarchs, but there are 4 patriarchs that are under consideration. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Okay? All right, so before the flood, come on, don't be shy. It's all right. Before the flood, scattering of the people, patriarchs. Okay? Now, listen, I know you guys feel embarrassed about doing this. I've done this every Sunday night or Wednesday for 5.5 years. Okay, so let's save it. All right. Okay, scattering of the people, patriarchs. Now, after the story of the patriarchs, we end with Joseph. Where is Joseph geographically when we come to the end of Genesis? He's in Egypt, okay? And then from Joseph, this great nation of people is going to arise, or from Jacob, but Joseph is a part of that. This great nation in the land of Egypt is going to arise, and that's going to give way to the 5th time period, which is the Exodus from Egypt, okay? God's people are leaving, and they're sprawling out as they leave the land of Egypt, okay? All right, good. Now, after God's people leave the land of Egypt, they disobey God, and as their punishment, what do they have to do for 40 years? All right, number 6. Everybody get out your little walking legs, and you're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, okay? You're going to walk around in the wilderness 40 years. All right, so let's see if we can go from the top, okay? Before the flood. The flood, come on, say it. Scattering of the people. Patriarchs. Exodus from Egypt. Wandering in the wilderness. Now keep your hand out here. All right? Keep your hand right there. Because after we wander in the wilderness, we come into the promised land led by Joshua. And what form of leadership takes over in the land of Israel? I'm sorry? You know what? I got ahead of myself. And here I've got all these things memorized for years and years, and I got ahead of myself. Okay, after we wander in the wilderness, leave your hand there, okay, sorry. First, before we get to the judges, we have to invade and take the land. So invasion, you're going to circle the land, right? The spies circle the land, and conquest, chop them up. All right, the kids love that one. Pow! Ninja chop all those Canaanites, okay? All right, so wander in the wilderness, invasion, conquest of Canaan. Now comes what kind of leadership? Leave your hand out there. Judges, okay? 3 of them in a row. You're going to have your hand right there. All right? Wander in the wilderness, invasion, conquest, judges. Okay, good. Now, after the judges, 15th judge, Samuel. And the people came to Samuel, remember this story, 1 Samuel chapter 8, and they said, give us a king that we may be like all the nations. Okay, so God gives them a king, and that leads to the united kingdom. Israel is united. There are 3 kings in this period, Saul, David, and Solomon. But after the united kingdom, what happens? All right, the kingdom divides, so we separate our hands, okay? We've got Israel in the north, and we've got Judah in the south. Now, all the kings of Israel were despicable men. And because of that, God lets them go away into captivity at the hands of Assyria, which leaves Judah alone in the south. So after we divide our hands, Assyria in the north, and this is really important, right? The northern kingdom goes away. So don't take the bottom hand. Take the northern kingdom away and leave Judah alone there in the south. Sarah.
My question is, United Kingdom, which hand's on top doesn't matter?
No, that doesn't matter.
As long as you remember to...
Yeah. Top hand goes back. It doesn't matter. Left top, right top, doesn't matter. Okay? All right, so we've got Judah alone down here in the south, and, well, what do? They follow in the same footsteps of Israel in the north who went into captivity. So we go from Judah alone to captivity. Now we got both hands tied behind our back. You see how this works in 2 ways? Both of our kingdoms are now gone, and hands tied behind the back, we're all in captivity. We're all in bondage, okay? See, these hand motions make a lot of sense, don't they? I wish I was clever enough to have come up with these, but this was totally a woman that did this. Okay, you all knew that. Now, after captivity, we return from captivity. So we're going to bring one of our hands back around, okay? Doesn't matter which one. You can even bring both hands if you want. Doesn't matter. Just we're going to come back from captivity, and that's number 13, the return from captivity. Now, if you think about where we are in the biblical story and the biblical books, we come back from captivity. We've got some minor prophets that are closing out the Old Testament. We come to the end of the Old Testament. And then there's that blank page between the Old and New Testament, and that's our 14th time period. That is the years of silence, and this hand motion makes obvious sense. The years of silence, number 14. Then after the years of silence, who comes onto the scene? The most important character in all the Scripture. The life of Christ is next. And there's different hand motions you can do for this. Typically, what I have seen is people who will just touch their wrists, okay? Just think about the nails that went through the hands of Jesus on the cross, okay? So the life of Christ. I've seen people do other things, but that seems to work. After the life of Christ, think about that thing you did when you were a kid, right? Here's the church, here's the steeple, you know. I know it's not exactly correct, but when you flipped your hands over, when you did that, when you wiggled your fingers, what did that represent? All the people. Okay, that's going to help you. That's the hand motion for the early church, the disciples of Jesus. So we have the life of Christ followed by the early church. The little kids in Bible drill struggle to do this with their hands so much. Early church. Wiggle those fingers. And then the last one, the letters to the Christians. And you're just going to write your letters like Paul did, like Peter did, and so forth. Letters to the Christians. That's the entire Bible in 17 pieces. Okay? All right. Now, let's go back and start at the very beginning. And let's make our way through them. You are welcome to do the hand motions if you want to. You don't have to. Mark, I know you're really excited about doing the hand motions. I can tell. You don't have to do them, okay? More than anything, I want you to learn the 17 periods, okay? So what's our first one? All right, before the flood, okay? All right, good. What's next? Good, the flood, okay? Then scattering of the people. Some of y'all have been sitting in here when I've done Bible drill all these years, and you know all these. You're probably saying them in your sleep, okay? Scattering of the people. Okay, now, if you're struggling to think about what comes next, just think about the Bible story. It's like, okay, I know Genesis 11, Tower of Babel. Genesis 12, who's Genesis 12? What's that? What's next? Number 4, this is the patriarchs. 4th time period, 4 patriarchs, right? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Okay, good. After the patriarchs, we have Exodus from Egypt. Are you seeing that there is a logical flow to each of these from one to the next? Like, if you're familiar with the Bible story at all, you can figure these out, okay? Exodus from Egypt. Now we leave Egypt. What comes next? All right, we get out our legs, we wander in the wilderness, okay, while we're yawning. It's okay. It's okay. It was just funny listening to you say it. All right, we wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and then after that, invasion and conquest, good. All right, then we have Judges, okay, good. After the period of the Judges, United Kingdom, all right, then divided kingdom, okay, good. All right, who goes away first? Yeah, Israel does. We have Judah alone, okay, and then tie those hands behind your back. We're all in bondage together, captivity, okay, good. Now we return from captivity, okay, followed by the years of silence. Okay, see, you guys, you didn't say anything in your answer. That was smart. That was real sneaky. You guys went completely silent because you knew the answer, right? Is that what it was? All right. Okay, the years of silence, then life of Christ, good, okay, followed by early church, those disciples of Christ, and then the last one is the letters to the Christians. Okay, good. Okay, we're going to review these from time to time. I have already referenced the 10 or 12 copies of these books. We've got those. I will just type these out and give you a handout of these if you would like for me to do that. Okay, good job. Now, the first 4 time periods are all entirely covered in the book of Genesis. You may have noticed that as we were going through those. It ends with patriarchs, ending with the life of Joseph in the land of Egypt, and that's where Genesis ends, Genesis 50. So the first 4 of these are in the book of Genesis. All right, good job. Do you have any questions about the time periods before we crack open our Bibles and get into the text? Okay, good. All right, so let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Don't write down this outline or try to take a picture of it. It's in this book, okay? I just put it up on the screen. This is a very short outline of the book of Genesis, so you can have an idea of how it's going to fit together. Genesis basically breaks down into 2 major sections. Chapters 1 through 11, and then chapters 12 through 50, which is the story of the patriarchs, okay? So the first 3 time periods are going to be over here. Time period 4, the patriarchs, is over here on the right. Okay. Who wrote the book of Genesis? Moses. There is ample scriptural testimony for that. There are a number of references to Mosaic authorship in the scriptures. And because of that, I'm not going to take any time dealing with other ideas and theories that are out there about who wrote the book of Genesis. I have a commentary in my office. It's kind of a technical commentary. And before it even gets to the first comments of the text of chapter 1, there are 100 pages of introductory material. And that just drives me up the wall. I understand that people have to say these things and feel like that they need to address all these ideas that are out there. But I don't need 100 pages of commentary to understand Genesis. I'm not going to spend time talking about whether or not Moses wrote this. The Bible says Moses wrote it, therefore I believe Moses wrote it. Now, in this book, pages 20 and 21 have a little bit to say about that if you want to read more into that. So let's go to Genesis chapter 1, and let's start in verse 1. Genesis 1, verse 1, we've all been reciting this from the time we were children. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God was there. He has always been there. He always will be there. There is so much about Genesis 1 that I don't understand. I can't grasp some of the things that are said here. And I suspect you probably feel that way too. But I don't have to understand the mechanics of how the creation worked. It was a miracle. It was a miracle by an all-powerful, all-wise God who has been there from eternity past. And he tells me in this book, these are his words, his narrative of how creation was accomplished. And so I'm going to just believe that God's words are the best. Did you notice that God is not explained in Genesis 1? There are no arguments that set forth how do we know God exists. No, Genesis 1 just assumes that he is there. It assumes that God is real. He is not explained because really God cannot be explained, can he? Genesis 1 doesn't say anything about God's origin because he doesn't have an origin. The Bible doesn't try to explain these ideas to us. It just assumes that they are right and that they are true. God was there before the beginning of time. And time began when God willed it to begin. In the beginning, God created that. Well, when was that? It was whenever God said he was ready for it to start. God determined when the beginning was. So Genesis doesn't set out to defend the existence of God. It assumes it. Now, there is a place for defending the existence of God. There is a place for those kinds of scientific and philosophical endeavors. My Bible class right now is not that place, though. If you have your book, and you don't have to have it, I told you that Sunday, you don't have to have it, but if you do, I want you to go with me to page number 8. Page number 8. I want to call your attention to something that I think we need to make some comments about. On page 8, the author begins walking through the 17 time periods and laying out the overarching story of redemption. And the second paragraph on page 8 has some wording that I take issue with, and I want to call your attention to this. Second paragraph. There were 3 beings in existence who are as everlasting as eternity itself. Jehovah, the Word, and the Holy Spirit. These separate beings. Okay, I want you to notice those terms. 3 separate beings. I'm not comfortable with that language. I think it gives us the wrong impression of God. Now, I knew the author of these books. Some of you may have known him as well. And while he was living, he passed away about a year or 2 ago. While he was living, he had forgotten more of the Scripture than I would ever hope to know. I have nothing but the utmost respect for this man and the work that he did in the kingdom. But I don't like this wording. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he was just trying to articulate a complex idea in a way that we could understand. I just don't know that we can articulate this complex idea. Does the Bible ever use the word Trinity? No. Does the Bible teach the Trinity? Yes. Father, Son, Spirit, each one distinct, and yet all still one God. The Bible teaches that. I can't explain that, though, can you? I can't wrap my head around that. I can't articulate that. And I think the author here was simply trying to help us to see this idea that there are distinct persons in the Godhead. I think persons would have been a better word, not separate beings. There were not 3 gods in existence. There was one God in 3 persons. Now that's about all that I can say of it confidently. Sometimes it's easier for us to explain what something is not than to explain what something is. And I think this is one of those cases. Okay? Now, Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. In Genesis 1 and verse 1, you have three things that all come into existence at the same time. In the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter, material. Time, space, and matter all came into existence simultaneously because God made it so. And then in verse 2, as we just read, it says that God's Spirit is hovering over the surface of the waters. What waters? Well, we haven't even gotten to the waters yet, have we? See, I think the understanding of this, and this seems to be the predominant view, is that what God did is that He, in verse 1, throw in verse 2 as well, God creates everything. He creates the raw materials. But as verse 2 says, it's all formless. It's a waste, your translation might say. There's no form or shape to any of it yet. Then we get into the days of creation, and God begins to give shape to all these raw materials. You follow what I'm saying? So we get into day number 1, and what does God create on the first day? He says, "Let there be light." There are other things that are mentioned in verse 3, 4, and 5. It mentions light, darkness, day, and night. And it says evening and morning was one day at the end of verse 5. You're going to see that expression repeated, evening and morning, evening and morning. Okay? And that's establishing this 24-hour time period that we still function with on the earth today. In Genesis chapter 1 and in verse 6, then God said, "Let there be an expanse and separate the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse." And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, a second day. So the Spirit of God in verse 2 is hovering over the surface of the waters, but now in day 2, God begins to separate those waters and give some form and shape. And then we're going to see, when we get to God making the dry land, these waters are going to be separated into seas and lakes and rivers and all those things. God is taking all of this material that He has made and He's forming it. He is shaping it into this created earth, universe, sun, stars, all these things that are coming in the 6 days of creation. Your Bible might not use the word expanse. It might use this word that starts with an F that nobody knows what it means. The firmament, or the firmament, as one child said to me once. The skies, the atmosphere, this space that exists, that we can look up and we see the birds flying and we see airplanes flying through. That's the expanse. That's the space, the atmosphere. And this is now God creating light, separating it from darkness, establishing morning and evening, darkness, light, day, night, now separating the waters from above from the waters that are below. And as the earth continues to be formed and take its shape, all of this is going to come together into something beautiful that God says at the end of Genesis 1 is very good. Now, good. I'm so glad that bell rang because I have nothing else to say about this. I told you there are things in Genesis 1 I don't understand. The first 6 verses are right up there at the top. Okay. Hey, if any of you are interested in learning about this memorization method, meet me up here at the front, and I'll walk you through that real quickly. Ronnie, yes, sir.
Can I just take a couple minutes here to read something out of the book?
You want the mic?
I think I would suggest that everyone read very carefully on page 21, the last chapter in the last paragraph on page 21 says it all to me. How can we listen carefully to these words? How can we choose to believe that Jesus died for our sins and that we have a hope of heaven, and at the same time deny the first chapter of the Bible is true? How could we know which parts to believe and which parts to disbelieve? Perhaps an even more basic question is, if God did not create us, then what right does he have to command us? If God has no right to give us the commands, then what right does any one being have to command us? If no one can command us, then my rights and my ideas are supreme, and your ideas, rights and ideas are supreme, and we have total anarchy. There is no order in society. The entire Bible stands or falls as a unit. It is all God's word, and we must take it as such. That paragraph needs to be read over and over again and remembered where it is and what it says, because it says it all.
All right. Amen. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Come to the front if you want to learn this method.